Hacking numbers into a universal language, something that can change absolutely everything. In today's world, we use numbers significantly more than we ever have before. Our languages have evolved for thousands of years. However, our numbers have not. Now we have things like currency symbols or percent sign, but these are just, 0.01% of an impact of what is out there or the potential we can have. With a little bit of effort, we can give numbers their own language and make them 1,000 times better. There are some common questions on numbers because a number by itself means very little. We have to sort of put it in perspective. Is it changing? Is it increasing or decreasing? Is it changing in the right direction? Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? How does it change compared to others, more or less? Are we trending above the average or below the average? How close is it to the target or optimal state? And how much of an impact is it having on the total? Because again, it has to be put in perspective. And is it real? Are there influence or unusual events? There might be a couple hundred insurance claims in the Florida coast, and then there's a big hurricane and there's thousands of claims. So if you were looking at just the numbers, you would see a huge spike. So you need some way of flagging unusual events or numbers. So how awesome would it be if every number had this and more? So when you looked at a number in just a few seconds, you knew all those things. Was it trending up or down? How was it compared to the others? Was it trending in the right direction or the wrong direction? All of that you could get by just looking at the number itself and a symbol or two right next to it. Okay, so let's give some examples of the core set. And the core set is a basic element set of symbols that we're going to use for numbers, but it's going to be very expandable. But again, the key thing is it's going to be very simple. So the example is my HDL cholesterol is 60. What does that mean? The old way, you'd get a paper or a test result that had HDL 60. There'd be a reference with a range and some accompanying data next to it, but you'd have to read through it. And if you wanted to know what it was last year, you would need another test result page with other references, etc. And again, there's no standard way today to even come close to showing that. Everyone's doing it a little differently, and they're doing it very inefficiently. So, the new way, let's start with a few basic elements, starting with the HDL of 60. Add an arrow. Up is up, down is down. How easy can that be? So we've got 60 and we've got an arrow going up, indicating it's going up. The next question would be, what is the correct direction? If it's going up, should it be going up or should it be going down? So the tail end of the line shows the optimal best direction. In this case, we have an arrow going up and the end of the tail is showing the opposite direction. So we are going up, but we should be moving down. Okay, that's already much more information than people ever have when they're looking at just a number by itself. But let's compare it to others. A circle above the arrow shows the average is above us. A circle below the arrow shows the average is below us. A circle on the line of the arrow shows we are equal to the average. So here we have a 60 and we have a bold circle. So a bold circle would mean it would be significantly higher. And a note, for example, the tail of the arrow is going to be solid and always be bold because that's an important measure. So not everything is going to change. So we have to keep it as simple as possible. So some things, some elements can get thicker and bolder and some can't. There's a whole, again, a structure and language around this. Another element we could show is this number impacted by events or drugs, some non-natural number? For example, the hurricane I gave as an earlier example, or if I was already taking drugs to manage my cholesterol, we want to show that this 60 means something, but it's also being influenced by something else. And that can be footnoted or highlighted through some other symbols we're going to use, but we're going to use a line in the middle if it's broken, indicating that that is a number that already has some significant influencers. So we already have a great amount of useful information, maybe 80 or 90% on what a normal person would want to know about that number. Is it trending well? How does it compare? But with just a few more options, we can increase the amount of information exponentially. So basically, our arrow can also be vertical or horizontal. And the line type for the arrow can be solid, dashed, or both. And for example, the arrow tip can have 1 to 3 different types of tips. Again, we're keeping to a few basic symbols, but if you add those up, the amount of information that we can be expressing within these numbers is phenomenal. Okay, so I'm going to give another example of how deep we can go. We're trying to keep it easy. A short example on grading. And this is an example of where keeping it relative is a critical term because you want to weigh the effort versus the gain. So let's say that your final exam is 10% of your grade. What does that mean to you? Now, if you already had 100% on everything plus extra credit, then it means basically nothing. If your teacher only graded on letter grades, not numbers, then if you got 0 on your final exam, you'd still have an A in the class. So from that perspective, for you, it doesn't mean really anything. However, if you had a D plus, and this could bring you to a B minus or an F, this would have a truly significant impact. Wouldn't it be great if the test before your final grade had a number on it, your current grade of, let's say, 69% or something like that, your D plus, and next to it was another number and some symbols telling you the significance of your final. Therefore, your teacher wouldn't have to do it. The computer would calculate it for you, and it would tell you, in essence, if you had 2 very critical tests and you already had an A on everyone and you only had so much time, what's the most efficient way to do it? Or if you were an engineer working on a more efficient motor and you were working on the resistance or some component of it, and you wanted to know as you changed it what the impact or the optimal effort for your component had on the overall efficiency of the engine, you would already have a symbol set that you learned in 2nd or 3rd grade, and you have your engineering enhancements to this, but it's very clear and precise so you know how to read and interpret the results. With just a few simple lines, symbols, and arrows, we can express an amazing amount of information. Something that everyone can understand. How sick am I? How are my sales figures doing? How clean is my city's water? How is it compared to the average? And so much more. And this covers 90% or more of the most common questions you would want to have on everyday numbers you see, whether it's a health report, a test for you, or a sales figure, or something you're looking at. But we are going to add more detailed symbols and enhancers for sales analytics, medical fields, legal fields, and more. Again, this is going to be a language, so we're going to expand beyond the core set, but again, it's going to be consistent. So once you learn the core, it'll be very easy to add or understand the additional fields. The key points: we're going to keep the core and basics simple so you can easily understand it. These are going to cover 90% or more of common questions that we have every day about numbers. We're going to have a standard approach and methodology to everything. So when we expand this field-specific symbols, we're going to keep these same basic rules so you can learn additional specific fields very easily. In a few short years, we can take everything that we look at and make the numbers express things in very simple terms that used to take us a lot of time to understand, and often we wouldn't even have time to even understand the basics. So this can really change absolutely everything.